Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Monday, the 18th of October. Here in Alberta, it is voting day for municipal elections, so make sure you get out and vote if you haven't already. And make sure you take into consideration the referendum questions about um, suggesting that we remove equalization payments from the federal government to the provinces, and also the question about whether or not we should stay on daylight savings time permanently. Please give those questions some thought because they actually do have some significant ramifications, both of them. Today, I'd just like to talk about why do and don't people go to church. There are still people old enough in our pews to remember and fondly those days, sort of post World War II, when the churches were full. I remember having a church where they talked about how they used to have 400 kids in the Sunday school and they had toast and hot chocolate every day in Sunday school. That happened a really long time ago. And those folks really struggled with the fact that we may some days not have a Sunday school at all, or if we did, it was just a couple of people and we struggled to get teachers. Nowadays, I wonder if people even really pay much attention to that. We always have that sort of, I remember back when. But more and more of the people who are the older people, the elders of our parishes, they're getting to the point where they don't remember those times themselves. Um, I'm 50 and I don't remember when there were that many kids in Sunday school. In the 70s, I remember there being a large Sunday school when we were at Trinity in St. Thomas, Ontario, and a smaller group at Christ Church in Listowel and Hanover and St. James in Hanover. Um, and Niagara Falls didn't really have many at all at St. Martin's, and I think that was sort of the trend, what was happening. So even for me, I can't remember back when there was a massive Sunday school and all kinds of things happening. The need for confirmation classes every year and all of those things. Times have changed. Sunday shopping, hockey on Mondays, all of these things have contributed. And while there are still people who are bemoaning the fact that hockey has happened, those are still sometimes the very grandparents who are bemoaning the fact that hockey is at the same time as church, who will sometimes let me know that they can't come to church because they're going to watch their grandson or their granddaughter play hockey. It's the irony of that, isn't it? The fact is that in this particular era, I wonder what is the impetus for going to church? What was the impetus for going to church 60 years ago? Was it because people felt the desire and need to have a relationship with Jesus Christ? Was it because they needed to feel the power of the sacraments of receiving absolution from their sins and the gift of everlasting life through the communion, the body and blood of Christ? Was it because that was where their friends gathered, where they were able to be present and sit down and rest for a little while and listen to a good word being spoken and then have coffee and catch up with their neighbors and people they hadn't seen all week? Nothing wrong with that at all either. But these days, especially in COVID, when we can't have coffee together and people are nervous about going out, and to be quite frank, most of our congregations, it seems, at least the ones I have witnessed, are older generations are the are who are who were the younger go-getters, the people on councils and vestries from 20, 30 years ago that are now expected to continue that work because there isn't another young generation coming up behind them to take over. Where when they took on those roles, were able to believe that, they do their part for 10 or 15 years and then the next generation would come up and help them and they could settle into the pew or make sandwiches for lunches and things like that. They're finding that now they're being asked at 80 and 85 years old to be a member of parish council or vestry, or to continue on with the altar guild, or to carry on with the finances in the parish, the fundraising committees and the property committees and things like that. And for those people who are energetic and want to participate, that's awesome. But there are also, I think, a cohort of people who are faithful to their community, who are saying, I'll stick with it because if I don't, who will? And that seems a shame if that is where the church is coming from, if that is where the church is going to, if we're in a place where we're actually talking about in 20 or 30 years, or even 5 or 10 years, will we have to close our doors because there's no one else left to be a warden, to pay the bills, to keep the hydro on, even able to come and sit and sing together? COVID has really, really taken a beating on the church, and in some ways, it has encouraged and spurred the church on to do things in a new way, to reach out in new ways, and that is fantastic. We are able to take the good news of Jesus Christ and share it with those who are maybe reluctant to come to church, or maybe this isn't their thing, or they just don't have time, so they watch online. There's an element of community in church missing, though, on the online. There is something very powerful about sitting beside someone in the pew or beside them at the altar rail to receive the bread and the wine, the body and blood of Christ. There is something about seeing someone stand up to say, I have a new grandbaby, and clapping, or gathering around a new widow when the first time she comes to church after she's buried her husband. The community is very much a part of how we worship. Sometimes I think we get hung up on the liturgies and what we do technically during worship, which book we're using, which music are we listening to, what time are we worshiping at, who is our priest, do we like him or her, or no, we don't like him or her, they aren't who the last one was, or thank God that one's gone and we have a new one. All of those personality issues, they're all real. They're all real, because when we gather as church, we gather as people. And we bring with us all of our foibles and all of our gifts. And when we come together, we meld them into one big place, in one big group, and we learn how to deal with them. And that's the thing, that when we gather as church, when we gather as a community, we learn how to deal with one another. We learn how to love other people. We learn how to respect one another, to acknowledge and respect the dignity of every human being. We even learn some things from one another. And hopefully, in and around and through all of that, we continue to learn about the love of Jesus Christ for all of God's children, the need we have to take care of God's creation, the power of the Holy Spirit working in and through our group as a community. And then as we leave and go back into the world, that we take that Spirit with us to share with others. That's all part of church. And that's something I'm afraid that we've I don't know if we've figured out how to share those parts, those communal parts, over something like computers and video screens. But people are making choices. They're choosing not to come to church. Now, I know there's plenty of churches out there. I hear about them all the time. They've got lots of people in church and big Sunday schools, and clergy. We're just like everybody else, a little bit competitive sometimes, and people want everybody to know they're doing so well. But the reality is that those few churches, maybe they're city churches, I don't know, but those churches that are they're thriving and doing really well, that's awesome and that's great. But not everybody can get to that community church, that city church, or that place that's doing really, really well. Others of us are here doing the work of God, whether we're ordained or lay people, out in the reality of Sunday being the only day of rest for so many people. And for many people, it isn't even that, a day of rest. They still have to work. And we're trying to discover, how do we bring church to people, or how do we encourage people to come to church? And we can run programs, and we can change our service times, and we can create as many different ways as we want to figure out how to entice people to want to be here, because it's exciting, it's energizing, or it's peaceful and contemplative, or whatever they wish, whatever they need. But at the end of the day, is it really all about Jesus Christ, or are we about keeping our doors open? My hunch is it's a bit about both, and that's good. As long as Jesus is in it, that's like 100% perfect. As long as Jesus is there, then we need to keep doing it. We might have to find better ways to do it, but we need to keep doing it. But what happens when the people are coming to church and it's not about Jesus? What happens when their choices about coming to church aren't because they're being filled up with the Spirit? They're being given strength to go into the world, or even new things to think about that Jesus would have them think about. But what happens when church isn't about faith? If it's only about the things that make us feel good, then when we stop feeling good, then we won't want to go to church. I wonder where we're going. Tomorrow I'll pick up on that and talk about maybe where can we go that's positive in church and how can we encourage people. But right now I'm wondering, why is it that people don't come to church like they used to? And why is it that they do for those who do? I'm not trying to be depressing, just asking a real question that needs to be asked. Give it some thought. I'll be back with you tomorrow to talk about church again. Have a great day. God bless you. Stay warm. Enjoy the sun. And I'll see you tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael on Tuesday.